Thank you. I'd like to welcome you to the breakout sessions this afternoon. My name is Darwin, and I work for Infor, a $3 billion company, the largest ERP company revenue-wise after SAP and Oracle. But the reason you may never have heard our name is most people know us by all the brands that we bought up, so we're a company of acquisitions. So I'd just like you to put your hands together if you've had a valuable morning here at Gitlab Commit. Can you give some clapping, show us how much did you enjoy the morning? Great, great. So among other things, my team runs a scaled out instance of GitLab as a service internally. It runs on Amazon ECS containers, and we back the database as well as the file system with Amazon Platform as a Service services. So we use S3, EFS, Elasticache, and RDS we use PostgreSQL, of course. So today I want to take you through some of the phases of how we are in our journey with CI, leveraging GitLab and why it's a unique and positive solution for what we're trying to do. Maybe my clicker's not on. Oh, I felt it vibrate. Oh, so it's, here we go. All right. So we're going to talk about never hiring a butler to do a robot's job. So basically, I'll give you the end at the beginning. At Infor, we believe that production applications really deserve modern, self-serve, production-grade continuous integration. So production-grade is the key that you're going to hear again and again as we walk through. First, I'm going to walk through with you a little bit about Infor and its application portfolio, because it's important to understand the complexity and the breadth of that portfolio to understand why we've done it the way we've done it. And it'll help you understand if some of this applies to your situation. Oops, going the wrong way. Then we'll talk about the required SCM and CI solution anatomy that implies. So if you're going to do production grade, just like your customer applications, what would you then do for CI? We've done it in GitLab, and we'll be talking about GitLab, but it's kind of more of an architectural context. We'll also talk about the product managed automation that we've built around GitLab runners. And we'll talk about how being product managed is a unique aspect of how we've done this automation. We'll talk then about the nuts and bolts of comparing robots to butlers and what some of those benefits and challenges are. And then we'll talk also about the cyborg butler. So Jenkins is not standing still, right? It's moving into this much more automation-friendly format, and we'll talk a little bit about how that intersects with what we've covered. So Infor is a company of developers, 4,000 developers, hundreds of applications, very complicated environment due to the fact that we have been grown by acquisitions. So we've acquired all kinds of companies, various different technology stacks. We are also multi-platform, so where we are using instance as a service, we're about 50-50 on Linux and Windows. We also have all the kinds of code languages that you can imagine, and some maybe that you can't imagine. So we've got almost everything. About 5 years ago, Infor went through a transformation and was one of the first large software houses to say, we're taking everything we have into the Amazon cloud. And they did that pitch in. So that transformation was largely complete as far as a lift into the cloud about 2.5 years ago. And then from there, they went to multi-tenancy. So taking that software that at that point was most likely single tenancy for an individual customer and changing that into multi-tenant. Also at that time, DevOps automation was introduced. So developers who previously would set up their own application, get it compiling right, were tasked with learning automation so that that same stack could be deployed into various environments, development, test, stage, production. And this also allowed them to understand where their application needed to be adjusted to be truly DevOps capable. We also have a unique security situation. Every application must be secure from other applications in production, and every customer tenant must be secure from other customer tenants. Now, if you follow 12-factor application principles, you have to bring that same security model right back into development, because you don't want a free-for-all in development, and then all of a sudden when you go to production, there's all kinds of security problems because it's locked down. So that environment had to come back, and that actually dictates a lot of what we did with this solution. We're multi-tenant on the customer side, so we want to have that, if at all possible, in our CI. We have a lot of legacy CI in the form of Jenkins. Obviously, Jenkins is everywhere. We have a lot of it. We will continue to have a lot of it for quite some time to come. Our development is got a true DevOps type cycle. So we support the CI/CD environments concept of promoting to different environments. Everything needs to be automated. The way we stand up GitLab is 100% automated. I can go home today and stand up a new instance of our GitLab, the same one as we run in production, in a test stack. It takes probably a couple hours to deploy, but a few minutes to kick off. And finally, something that's really interesting is the adoption of our tooling is voluntary. We don't force march developers because they've got very complicated stacks and they are tasked with delivering features to customers, not with playing with DevOps tooling all day long. And so because of that, they voluntarily need to adopt this tooling, so we have to make it attractive to them. So in some ways, our environment is as complicated as you can imagine GitLab.com being to all the customers out there. Different team sizes, different technologies, different requirements. So we really feel that CI should be production grade at a minimum because downtime impacts developer productivity. And if all you are is a development company, that's the main workforce, right? Also, that impacts customer feature velocity. So if developers can't get stuff developed, then it starts to impact customers' experience of what new functionality you're releasing or what bugs you're fixing. So really, if you have, if you have to hotfix production, so any security issues need to be handled quickly. You don't want CI to be stood up on toothpicks. So when a SaaS application is developed with agile DevOps, it really doesn't make any sense for CI to be handcrafted, house of cards, single point of failure. And if you think about your CI, or you think about some of the CI you've discovered under someone's desk, I'm going to guess that you found a few pretty scary situations as far as the production gradeness of CI. So we want to be production grade just like our customers' experience of our software. And why shouldn't developers have the same production grade as what they're trying to create for customers? So production grade 12-factor DevOps. What will that look like if we try to bring that into the CI world? So first of all, we'll have the IDIs built in: securability, scalability, high availability. These should just be built in. It should be part of what CI is. And this would also include taking feature requests and bug fixes if any of this isn't working right. Now, we don't work on GitLab software itself, but we do automation to build out the runner, and we take it seriously like a product. Also, self-serviceability. So one of the little secrets about GitLab is it has service management automation and multi-tenancy built in. These are two things that we would love to have in our customer tools. So at our company, if a customer signs up, we don't let them self-service deploy a tenant for themselves. They do have to contact our sales team. From there, it's fairly simple, but you do know of other stacks where you just go in and deploy it yourself. Well, if you can bring GitLab in-house and maintain that benefit, you keep a smaller admin team and a smaller admin cost for servicing developers' needs. Also, scalability. So we achieve scalability through AWS ASG, as well as using the Docker Executor. Also, multi-platform. Mentioned we need to support Linux and Windows. Maintainability built in, and here's where doing automation as a product differs. So a lot of automation you'll come across, a team says, hey, here's how you deploy your runner. You use that automation to deploy the runner, and they say, hey, there you go, good to go. 6 months later, what do you got? The instance isn't patched, the runner is 6 versions behind, and so making maintainability a part of the automation that helps developers build out their CI was a core focus for us. High availability, again, we use AWS ASGs so that seminal first runner, if it gets terminated, it is reestablished. Now, the security part is where things dictate a lot of things for us. So we can't have CI running with a generic profile that has access to all team resources. And so we can't have kind of a shared build services. We need teams to, when they deploy stuff, it should act the same as when they build it on their workstation. So it needs to have the same security as when they build stuff and do operations in the environment with their own role. And then in addition, we don't want teams able to mix concerns because we don't want that in prod. And so it's very important that IAM role follow CI. Documentation. When you run something as a product, onboarding is important, and documentation and how-to guides are an important part of that. So we have one guide that within a team that's not familiar with our internal development tooling, and we have our own deployment tooling, if they're completely unfamiliar, we have one guide that should get them totally ready with a runner in about 30 to 60 minutes, depending on their experience level with our tools. Also, dependency isolation, another 12-factor item. Now, GitLab has this built in through using containers for build. Also, each individual runner is code isolated. The version of the runner running on that particular runner can be whatever it needs to be for the most part. But we also extend this through the security role as well as how our automation works. Cost manageability. In this frame, we have started to adopt Spot. So Amazon approached our executive management and said, hey, you guys really need to look at Spot. And one of the workloads that was immediately identified as potentially Spot ready is CI, because for the most part, it's mutable. A build dies halfway through, totally normal, right? It could have happened because you have an error in your code. And so using Spot saves 70 to 90%. A lot of people don't know that Spot, a 5% termination on Spot is extremely high. So it's not like your runner is going to be dying every other day. We also have our own custom scheduling system that shuts down runners whenever a team doesn't need them. So another reason for it to be fully mutable is they don't have to run even the one instance at any given time. So these are some of the aspects of what production grade CI means to us. These are the things we want to extend to our customers, and these are the things we want to bring back into the CI experience for our developers. So let's talk just a little bit about that product managed automation. So what does this automation do and what does it look like? So first of all, we have an orchestration system. It's not actually Terraform in our company because we've built our own CD deployment engine, which is still actually fairly advanced compared to some of what is out on the market. But Terraform would be a good analog. So if you use Terraform, and there are some good templates out there for building runners, it would be a good analog to what we use. This orchestration tooling bundles together Amazon CloudFormation, and one of the main things it does is set up an autoscaling group. So that autoscaling group is what allows us to have that scalability and that disaster recovery or high availability. Within that, we deploy a Spot fleet. And Spot fleet helps us in two ways. One is to reduce costs, but another one is a form of high availability. So it's possible if you ask Amazon, hey, give me a certain instance size in this availability zone, if that instance is exhausted in that availability zone, you get an automation failure. So even if you don't want to use Spot, you can use on-demand fleets so that you give it a list of instances. You say, I want one of these in this availability zone, dramatically decreasing the possibility that you'll have instance exhaustion. Also, within the instance content, so once we set this up, we have to be compliant with our own standards and security. So one of the first things is we have that dev team role. This makes the experience pretty seamless for developers, that what they can do at their workstation, they can do in CI. Then we have to support our full stack: hardening, vulnerability scanning, malware scanning, log shipping, monitoring. Then we put the Docker executor on there. And on Windows, we're still doing the shell executor, but we have the Docker executor. One of the cool things this has allowed us to do is, I'll talk in a bit about how we have run shared developer services on Jenkins. Well, when we went to this model, we got a really cool flexibility, and now we expose those services as containers. Download this container, run this stage for GitLab YAML in your pipeline, and boom, what you used to have in this shared Jenkins instance that we don't want to own anymore, you now have as part of GitLab Runner. So that was kind of an architectural serendipity. Once we went to this, all of a sudden we had that capability. Now this would be all well and good if we ended here. Hey, awesome, teams can get set up real quick. But as a product, we want to have maintainability built in. So some of the things they can do by simply rerunning the automation is they can patch the underlying instance. They can either get the latest Amazon AMI or Amazon Linux 2 AMI, or they can patch it. If they have a problem with the latest version, they can peg that version if they need to until they can resolve that issue. Same deal with the runner version. Gets the latest if you don't do anything, but you can peg it if you have a problem with the latest version. And then finally, runner tokens. So if you need to add some tokens, remove some tokens, update them, you can do so without destroying the whole stack and starting over again. So that's a little bit about how we do that runner automation and why we call it a product and how that makes some differences to our developers. Let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of Jenkins. But first, although we're going to take some jabs at the old Butler, he's no stranger in our house, and I want to tell you a little bit about our background with him. So first of all, we have many development teams using Jenkins. Obviously, the open source CI of choice that has come to the top and come to the fore. Your best option for free, very flexible. We've also built shared developer services on it, so we understand what it's like to take a single master and try to get lots of teams to access it and have it still be secure and have it not cause any problems. Within that, maintaining those shared developer services, we've had to deal with engine upgrades, plugin upgrades, build jobs that we don't want the developers to change. They can only execute them against their repo, patching, plugins. So we've had to deal with all the challenges, and user and group management as well. So all of these challenges are under our belt, and we're currently still doing it because we're slowly replacing the one Jenkins server that we have. It's actually composed of two Jenkins servers as we move to Gitlab CI. We even have automation for you to kickstart your own HA like Jenkins. So we know what it's like to try to make Jenkins act like highly available, scalable services. We also have teams who have top-notch Jenkins integrations with GitLab that are like the cat's meow. The one team that did this did it before we started really getting into GitLab CI, and they're planning to move to GitLab CI, but in the meantime, you could see how well Jenkins integrates. And that's really excellent because developers need to step up to this incrementally. We don't want a big bang. We don't want to say you got to throw out all your CI and tomorrow be running on GitLab CI and have no impact to your production schedules. So the excellent Jenkins integration is actually a huge positive because developers can step up to modernize CI as they see the value and as they can work it into their sprints. Let's talk a little bit about tenancy and service management automation. This, I think, is a hidden gem inside of GitLab. So when we work with Jenkins, you have a Jenkins master and workers. And whenever you work with them, if you try to get teams to share it, very quickly they have contention around plugins or the version of GitLab, or you guys upgraded GitLab because security said you had to, and it broke 5 builds, and now they're all angry at you. And so very quickly, it splinters. Teams start doing their own, right? So you get this spread and sprawl of masters. So there's not really, it's more single tenant and no service management automation. Teams can't easily step up to Jenkins with no admin rights and provision themselves an environment. With GitLab, we have an opposite situation. Now, if you're a small company, you might think of GitLab as just one big place for all your developers to go. But when you're in a big company like we are, and you have to have security concerns taken care of, the multi-tenancy benefits of GitLab become evident very quickly. So we can send a team there, and they can provision themselves. I have teams tell me, hey, we'd like you to set us up in GitLab so we can get going. And I just say, hey, we don't set you up in GitLab. You go to this document, and you go over to GitLab, and you get yourself set up in minutes, and you provision your CI if you need it. So this is a huge benefit if you have a lot of teams and you've got those security concerns that you need to have those teams running in their own spaces. This is kind of our scale right now. And we have, like I say, about 1.25 persons allocated to keeping GitLab up to date and keeping it vital. And that's mainly just doing monthly updates about 2 months after GitLab releases them. So we have 250 scaled runners. If you can imagine 250 Jenkins masters, that would be a lot of admin work going on, even though it would be down in those teams adminning them, or if you tried to run it as a shared service. Let's talk a little bit about the details of how this falls through. So we're going to talk a little bit about comparing Jenkins with GitLab Runner. This is opinionated. This is my take on it. You could probably come up here afterwards and say, hey, we got this really cool Jenkins setup, and it can do what you said it can't. And I would have to say, yes, you're right. If you do that, you can make it work. So we'll go through this, and I would love to hear about your experiences creating some of this. So both systems support containers. We have that per build isolation. Per build worker isolation is not so clean. So Jenkins workers are tethered more to the master. And so the code that they share and the code capabilities and plugins they're able to expose are more tethered to the master. CI engine isolation. So this is the version of Jenkins or the version of GitLab Runner. When we upgrade our GitLab instance, no CI instances are forced marched to a new version. Teams can take that in time when they're able. And then with plugins, we just have a lot lower emphasis of plugins in GitLab. There are some that are at the instance level or at the master level, but mostly you're dealing with building out that kind of thing on your own container, your own build container. So within Jenkins, we have a lot tighter lockstep between worker version and the main instance version, and in GitLab, that's a lot more flexible. Mutability, scalability, and high availability. So treating CI as pets, or as cattle, not pets. With build workers, we have pretty similar. Jenkins workers are fairly mutable now. You can set up farms, they can spin up, shut down. Not going to cause a lot of problems. Containers, of course, as soon as you embrace containers for build, you get this across the board, whatever your system is. Master scalability is not such a great story with Jenkins. We have to do basically vertical, not horizontal scaling. Also with master high availability, we can do some patching and some fancy footwork on the infrastructure as code side and get kind of a pseudo HA, but it's not something that's built into the product. For state data storage, this is the Jenkins master. With GitLab, it goes back to the mothership. So any state that has to do with builds always goes back to your instance. And GitLab, if you deploy it in a highly available, scalable format, such as on containers, well then you get that for all of your state data because it's automatically part of that instance. Securability. So what can we do with security? GitLab has well-defined, modern, minimal APIs. Jenkins, on the other hand, the APIs are not so well managed, and at a plugin level, a developer can do pretty much whatever they want. So once again, the open source story of lots of cool innovation going on, but it's up to each individual developer what their security disciplines are. So you end up having to make sure that all that code can actually be secured and stays secured. OS and product patchability. So when we patch GitLab, if we do a new GitLab CI version, or we patch GitLab itself, how likely are we to break the builds? In our experience, we've not had anyone call us yet in about 2 years that, hey, you broke our builds when you upgraded GitLab. And usually, if there's anyone complaining about weird behavior, we say, what's your runner version? Oh, you're like 5 versions behind? As soon as you update that, give us a call back. Never get the call back, right? So minimal master upgrades, very similar issue, minimal disruption when we upgrade GitLab itself. Secure plugin extensibility, so GitLab has a more secure approach to plugins. And then attack surface. For every master you have for Jenkins, that is another GUI that's out there, another somehow exposed port set and API set with whatever version of Jenkins you're running. GitLab, your UI is your GitLab instance. You secure that, all of your CI is secure. Then on to access control and service management automation. So per build worker isolated permissions, are we able to assign a role to a runner easier in GitLab? Self-service provisioning and admin. So that's what I mentioned about multi-tenancy. I think I got multi-tenancy on here as well. And the self-provisioning. That capability is built into GitLab instance itself, and it flows right through to you as a benefit for using GitLab CI. So CI is no different than your source control. General purpose automation. So when it comes to general purpose automation, Jenkins has been used as the Swiss Army knife in many, many situations. You might have a bunch of Jenkins jobs that really have nothing to do with CI or CD. You go in there and you type in a few variables and you deploy a new environment or a new Amazon VPC. So that can be a positive. GitLab is definitely more opinionated on what CI and CD are. So it's not that it's unflexible, it's just that it's not trying to be the whole world. And Jenkins, due to the extensibility through plugins, at certain points it's trying to be a lot of things, but that also enables a lot of potential anti-patterns. So GitLab's definitely more opinionated on generic automation. In my world, that feels good because I don't really want people using CI to do absolutely everything under the sun. How is it with modern development practices and support? So when developers embrace one over the other, what is going to be their experience of being encouraged to modernize their own CI practices? So for full CI system mutability, the ability for any part of it to be destroyed and it's not going to cause a problem for you, GitLab has a leg up because with Jenkins we have the master and we've got to do some external crafting to make it act as though the master is really fully destroyable and we won't suffer. We have it set up that way, Jenkins set up that way, so we do know what's involved, but it's not out of the box. Build as code, Jenkins has been slowly embracing it with Blue Ocean, declarative build, build as code, but in GitLab CI, that's the only way you can do it. So as soon as you start using GitLab CI, you don't have to tell developers, hey, don't start writing imperative code in those Jenkins build files. You don't have to worry about it because you can't. Environment customization history. So what generally happens? We've done demos internally, and I have had teams say, so how do we log into that runner? And I was like, why do you want to log into the runner? And of course the answer is always, well, I want to go in there and snowflake this, set up that. It's like, no, don't ever do that. Do that in your build container, or if you feel like the automation we provided for you for setting up the runner is insufficient, give us a feature request and we'll look at it. But you should not be logging into the runner ever, because anything you do there gets destroyed at night when your schedule shuts everything down. So in Jenkins, it's very common for Jenkins to very quickly get snowflaked. Production grade CI. So on the Jenkins side, it's a lot of work. And on the GitLab CI side, if you've deployed your GitLab instance as highly available and scalable, you inherit all the benefits of that instance right into CI. So that's a little bit about the breakdown of some of the Jenkins stuff. Now it's decidedly a little bit more oriented towards your standard Jenkins 2.0 master. So let's talk a little bit about the adaptation of Jenkins to be more robot-like. So in 2.0, we have 2.0 and Blue Ocean. Some of the things that are challenging is you can't disable pre-DevOps habits. So you can't say, I only want to do declarative build. Make this as much like a robot as possible. You also have the problem with masters being a state-saving point in your system and having to create some sort of HA manually and not having horizontal scaling. Compatibility, there are third parties that will do compatibility tested plugins so that each version of Jenkins you upgrade to, those plugins will all work together and they'll help you with that problem. But the fact that someone can build a service around that shows you that it is a real big problem on the Jenkins side if you're using it out of the box. Jenkins X. So this is the new and next wave of Jenkins. It's great to see that it's moving forward, trying to embrace more cloud native and more automation. It is fairly opinionated though, so it's Kubernetes only. So if you have teams that aren't deploying to Kubernetes and they're not ready to take in that overhead of understanding Kubernetes, well then they're going to be potentially burdened or tasked with running that Kubernetes cluster, and there's going to be a lot of overhead in deploying CI that's not even there for production applications. It's also still a Jenkins 2.0 engine, still has shared plugins. Also, it has a very opinionated Git workflow, so it wants you to do trunk-based workflows, and that might be something that you are or not willing to continue with. It also does, pipelines in Groovy, not YAML, so a lot of these things need some attention, and I'm sure they'll get attention over time, but they're still lagging a little bit. Also, both lack role-based security in a significant way. There is the ability to create groups and put users in groups, but definitely you can't have users come and provision themselves and do their own admin, create their own groups, create all their own security tokens. All of that's still lacking. So while there's great movement forward, there's still a long way to go compared to what we get with GitLab off the shelf already. So some points to ponder, some things to think about. GitLab's inherent DevOps readiness and production-grade CI enables production-grade CI implementation for us. So the inherent born for DevOps, born for cloud capabilities. GitLab has enabled us to scale up CI services with low admin overhead. So if you have a complicated environment with a lot of teams, this helps a lot. GitLab CI can also enable incremental evolution from Jenkins. So you don't have to go in a big bang. Teams can bite off bits of the problem at a time as they're ready, and they can deploy into Jenkins and get a very nice experience of Jenkins as well. Also, you got to ask yourself, is your CI production grade, or is it the weak link in the entire CI/CD DevOps puzzle? How well do you want to sleep at night? I can tell you that I sleep well at night. So At Infor, we believe that production applications require or deserve modern self-service production-grade continuous integration, and GitLab gets us there a lot quicker. So I thank you for your time and attention. I have some of my social handles on the screen. If you have any questions or anything, we can talk with you after the session. Thanks a lot.